My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Emily Howard. It's October 14th, 2025, and we're in the Nicholson Library at Linfield University in McMinnville. Emily, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
The first question for you, we usually ask why wine. In this case, I'm going to ask why food. What prompted you to get into working with food in the food industry?
I started working at Pizza Hut on Highway 99W here in McMinnville when I was in high school. That was my first restaurant job. And I oddly fell in love with it even then.
Love that. What about it?
I just liked the energy of it, the fast-pacedness of it. I liked the people who worked in it. And I liked the money. I remember when I got my first $40 in tips, I was so excited because I could finally buy my own bra. That's the truth, Ruth. So yeah, so there it went. And then that's what I ended up doing for the rest of my life. I started working in wine when I was 20. I got a job in a tasting room at Erath, then Erath Vineyards, with a great group of people who worked in the winery as a whole. And around that same time, I also got a job down the hill at Tina's. And that really kind of started my love of working in fine dining. Mm-hmm. So those two intertwined kind of seamlessly, simultaneously. After that, I left the McMinnville area and I moved to Portland. I worked in a wine bar. I worked in a French restaurant called Le Berge, which is where the original owners of Tina's, David and Tina, had worked in Portland, and so it was just important for me to work there. Mm-hmm. And from there, then I went to a steakhouse in downtown Portland called El Gaucho, and I was very young. I was in my early 20s, and they needed a wine buyer, and I had no right to buy the wine, but they said, well, you're from McMinnville, you know, you've worked in a winery, you know about wine. And I was like, I know very little about wine, but yeah, sure, why not? So at the age of 23, not knowing anything about anything, I became a wine buyer. So that set my course, unbeknownst to me.
Amazing. I'm gonna pick it back up there in a second. Talk about life before all that. You grew up in McMinnville.
I did.
Tell me about life before moving to the big city.
Oh, well, you know, McMinnville at that time was a very quiet, very sleepy place, and I could not wait to get out of here. I was too big for this town, and yes, I used to, you know, read the Sunday newspaper, the classified ads, and circle apartments that I wanted in Portland. I think that started around like 14. Yeah, I couldn't wait to get out. But, you know, it was a great place to grow up. My parents were wonderful. They instilled a great work ethic in me. I've had a job since I was 11, when you could start, you know, working in strawberry fields and then kind of work your way up in agriculture. You know, so that was both awful and cool. Yeah.
So let's talk about, you mentioned the two jobs when you're 20 years old that are kind of the catapult. So let's talk about those both. Talk about Erath first. Tell me about first introduction working in wine, working around wine. What was that like? I mean,
it was fascinating. I didn't really know anything about it, and so it was a great learning opportunity. And again, like I said, I worked with wonderful people. There was just an incredible crew of people in the cellar. Rob Stewart was the winemaker at the time. And yeah, it just really opened my eyes to, after high school, I had moved to London and spent a couple of years there. And while I was there, you know, you can drink there from the time of you were 18. And so I was always interested in wine. And so I would go to this wine shop called Odd Bins, and you could pick wine out of the barrel for like £1.99. And so I would try different wines that way, but I just didn't get it because I was like, this is actually quite gross. But then I realized once I started working at a winery that those bottles, in fact, were gross and bad wine, corked wine, the whole gamut of it. So yeah, so I figured it out. Mm-hmm.
And you talked about obviously simultaneously working at Tina's, first kind of foray into fine dining. Tell me about Tina's.
Tina's was a crazy place when I first started. It went through a major. They tore it down and rebuilt it. Well, kind of while I was working there, but in the very beginning, it was just in this very small little house, and you would take this chalkboard, tiny little chalkboard. That chalkboard will come back later, but the tiny little chalkboard, and you would put it on a chair in front of the tables, and that was the menu for the night, which was very cool. And again, I worked with amazing people, taught me a lot. There was a woman named Nancy that I worked for, and she was just a firecracker, man. Yeah, I liked her quite a bit. Mm-hmm. But I also worked with Mike Stiller, both at Erath and at Tina's. He was the one who got me the job there, and now he owns Tina's, and I love that full circle.
What did you learn about fine dining in Tina's?
Oh, everything. I knew nothing. I mean, again, no shade on growing up in McMinnville, but, we just didn't really have anything like that here, of that, caliber, how you open wine and pour wine and, just buttoned up and, and this gorgeous food and people loving the food. And I don't know, it was just great. I learned a lot. It's hard to remember how much I learned, but yeah, it was definitely foundational for me.
So Portland and a variety of places in Portland. So let's talk about getting to El Gaucho and working as a wine buyer. Mm-hmm. What were the initial challenges as you're taking over a wine program when you don't really know much about wine yet? What did you have to learn? Oh,
I had to learn everything and kind of on the fly. And so it was great. I had books, but also I learned so much from my wine reps. They were so gracious and so patient with me and just explaining, everything about everything, from how wine is made to how it gets from here to here and all of these different varieties that I didn't know about. I mean, granted, it was a steakhouse, and so there was a big focus on California Cab, Washington Cab, big reds like that, but then there were so many other Italian varieties that I learned about, and French, and yeah, it was a great experience. And I'm still in touch with those people from that time. So yeah, it's very cool.
What about your own kind of personal education and palate? How did it grow, and what were the kind of the things you found yourself being drawn to? I think you have an arc. Sometimes you circle back around to that arc, but, I don't know, started off, I, preferred red wine, and then I got into, light red wines, and then I got really into Rieslings. I'm also back really into Rieslings right now. But yeah, and then you kind of just get into you kind of stay in the white land, for a long time. That's now where I reside still. Champagne, bubbles, all of it. You just do deep dives into different varieties, and, you can get really geeky in all of that. But it's just, yeah, it's a wild ride, and you're always learning, right? As you know, everyone knows that you're never going to know all of it. And to educate myself, I started finding these old French cookbooks that would have these, because I'm very interested in food and wine pairing, right? And how all of that works. And you're not born knowing any of that. And yeah, you can wing it a lot of times. I still wing it a lot of times, but you want to have a solid foundation of knowledge. So with these old French cookbooks, there would be these elaborate dinners that you could make, and then it would tell you what wines to pair with those and kind of why. And so then reading these cookbooks and, thinking about the flavors and why this would go with this. And I'm gonna, that really helped me a lot too. And then that just kind of expanded
my knowledge, which was great. I'm kind of unconventional, unorthodox, but it worked for me.
If there's one thing I've learned in this job is there's no orthodox way to learn it.
I think you're right.
Tell me about building a wine list or taking over a wine list. What did you learn? How did you prepare a wine list?
Well, I think like it's something like El Gaucho it was pretty easy. It was pretty cut, and you knew what sold. You weren't really going to deviate from that. So that was just great to kind of, cut my chops a little bit. And from there, so I did that for years. And then from there I went and was the wine buyer at a restaurant called Veritable Quandary, which was a Portland institution. And again, just like ever expanding, it's rare when you start a wine list from scratch, right? It's like, although I have opened a lot of restaurants, so you do that then, but taking over someone else's vision, trying to understand what they're doing, trying to like slowly make it what you think it should be and create it how what you think would work best with the food, what you think, works best with the clientele, all of that. Mm-hmm. It's a process. Mm-hmm. And then I think it was at VQ, maybe shortly after that, I opened a restaurant called the Alberta Street Oyster Bar and Grill and kind of started that wine list from scratch. And that's really where I started like finding my own voice in wine. Like I was tired of wine lists all looking the same. And I was tired of how much people were charging for wine. I felt like it was absurd, especially, with like this short stint that I did at Erath and being from wine country and having so many friends who worked in wine and wineries, had wineries, I know how much wine costs, and then go to a restaurant and, that bottle of wine is, 4 times what it should be on a list. Like no, that's not my philosophy. I can't handle that. And then I get really pissed when I'm at dinner and I'm like, right, I'll have a gin and tonic. So yeah. But anyway, so Alberta Street Oyster Bar and Grill happened, and that was a few years of my life, and just gaining more knowledge about wine, more knowledge about food and wine pairing, and then from there I moved to Seattle briefly, less than a year, and then moved back to McMinnville and opened a small restaurant called Thistle. And that wine list was awesome. And it kind of ebbed and flowed, and it was a dance. Having a wine list in wine country is tricky. It gets very political very quickly. People get mad at you if they're not on the list, or offended, or, they come in and then, they try to sell you wine and just, you don't think it's a good fit, and then they stop coming in, and, or, they would, I had certain people who would come in and bring their own, like 6 bottles of their own wine for dinner, and then they would walk around the dining room during dinner pouring wine for everybody else, and I'm like, what are you doing? You're ruining me. Like, you can't do that. Like, I also need to sell wine in order to survive, so let's work together. But that wine list at Thistle was great. I felt like it had like an array of different local wines, something that could scratch an itch for everyone, for the diners. And then I felt like I did a good job curating a list that was interesting for the people who worked in the wine industry who didn't want to necessarily come in and drink Oregon Pinot Noir. And so that was great. And I had like the list, and sometimes the list was pages and pages long, which was crazy. And in that restaurant, a tiny little restaurant, I would keep everything. There was this weird bathroom in the middle of Thistle that I made my wine storage room because it was the coolest place in this non-air conditioned, non-heated restaurant that I owned. yeah, but I think it was great. So I always had like the list, and then I always had like the list. And so if you knew about the list, then yeah, that was really where it was at. So that was also really fun. That was never happened intentionally. It was more out of laziness, or lack of time, I should say. But anyway, it was good.
What are the key components of a good wine list?
Oh, I think, well, it should be compelling, adventurous. It should work well with the food. It should, yeah, be a little bit unpredictable and easy on your pocketbook, I think. But what do I like? I mean, and it's hard too, because like you're buying wine for the restaurant and you're buying wine for your clientele. You're not buying wine for you necessarily all the time. So I like a lot of acid in my wines. And so there were compromises that were made a lot.
So you mentioned veritable quandary, as you said, a Portland institution. So tell me about taking over a wine list like that has certain expectations attached to it. How do you maneuver it to where it needs to go?
It just takes a lot of time. It's not like you can come in and just like wipe a wine list out and start over from scratch. No one has that type of, financial capital to put into something like that, or space to be able to keep that wine. So then you just look at the list and you're like, okay, this wine, not my favorite, but I can see like what the goal was. So then what is it about, what void is this filling in the wine list? And like, how can I find something that's a little better in my brain, like a little more, again, more compelling, a little more off the beaten path, something that you can get excited about, and the servers can get excited about, and then the diner can get excited about. So you just slowly just start plugging away and like filling those holes in. As something like sells out, then you have something in the back. As a wine buyer, you're constantly meeting with wine reps and you're constantly tasting things. And it's not like, well, for me anyway, it's not like in that moment you're like, we'll take 6 of those and a case of that. But, you just have it all organized in your brain to be like, okay, like maybe, in 3 weeks feels like I'll have room for that. And then, and then that. And so you're constantly like going back through your notes and like, oh, what was that thing? What was that I tasted? And, and then that's how you're doing it. It's a whole job. It's not just like a hobby. I mean, it is that too, but yeah.
And then you talked about Alberta Street as a building from scratch, opening a restaurant. So tell me about approaching that. How is that challenge different?
I mean, that challenge is different. You're trying to find the voice of the restaurant. And the wine list, cocktail program, I mean, everything kind of plays into that. And, especially if, you aren't as familiar with the food as you will be, and you're not as familiar with like what the service will become, and all of that kind of factors into, it all factors into one another. So yeah, you just kind of like throw a bunch of darts and you're like, oh, this is what I need, like I need this many glass pours, this many bubbles. It was an oyster bar. So like you need this many bubbles and everything to be kind of like different. And yeah, so then you just kind of get it together and then you're like, go, and you see like what works and you see what doesn't work and like pull those immediately and then just, keep it going from there. Mm-hmm.
You said early on that, especially that you were relying on wine reps for a lot of advice, tell me about as you developed your kind of palate and your sort of ideas for it. Did you find yourself finding more wines in the wild, or was it still mostly kind of the same kind of relationship with wine reps and what they brought to the table?
Pretty much the same kind of relationships, although as those relationships get deeper and you trust one another more, then they just start bringing you things that they think that you'll like, as opposed to like things that either they have pressure to sell or that they're bringing to everybody else. I've always been very clear that I want to have a wine list that is unique and that you can't find anywhere else, and that you can't, go to the grocery store and buy those wines and all of that. So yeah, and most wine reps really get that, which is great.
So when you're in Alberta Street, you mentioned obviously that's in Portland. So tell me about the balance there for local wine versus non-local wine.
Oh, I mean, I think at the time, you have to think this is 20 years ago. So the wine industry didn't look anything like what it was, like what it is now. I mean, there's a million labels now, and there weren't then. And so yeah, you try to have some, you try to have some classics in there. Try to have people that you think are doing like the right thing, like in their farming practices and things like that. Newer ideas, newer concepts. Yeah, people who were doing different varieties other than Pinot Noir. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then moving on, fast forwarding a little bit to Thistle, what I found, what I thought was awesome at Thistle was that at the time, then suddenly there were these like second and third generation winemakers that were making wine. And so I was very into supporting that and supporting them, which was very cool. Mm-hmm. That wasn't around quite yet at the Oyster Bar.
So tell me about Thistle and about how it came to be. Obviously, you worked in a lot of places for a lot of people. What prompted you that it was time to start your own thing, and why was it Thistle?
Well, I had a partner who was a chef, and we had met at the Alberta Street Oyster Bar and Grill, and then in 2008, we moved to Seattle with the idea that maybe we would open a restaurant in Seattle. And the longer we were there, the more we realized it wasn't like a great fit for us. And so we knew we wanted to come back to Oregon, but McMinnville wasn't even on the radar. No. So we were, what are we, Astoria, Hood River, maybe Southern Oregon coast, we were kind of all over the place. And then we came down to visit my mom, and we just walked by this space that had been a restaurant for a long time, a very beloved Japanese restaurant called Kame. And Kame had moved down 3rd Street. And it was just this vacant, ready to go restaurant, which in restaurant land just doesn't really happen, or at least at that time. I think maybe it happens more now, but at that time it didn't happen. And so my partner was like, let's just do that. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I don't know if I can move back to McMinnville. I don't want to move back to McMinnville. But he won the coin toss. Mm-hmm. And then we just zipped back and forth between Seattle every weekend and just did a build out. Kame had carpeting, gross. And, so we had 2 layers of carpeting in the bar, tore all of that out. We did, so we kind of prepped it for a month, and then we moved. And let me just rewind, the 11 months that we had been living in Seattle, we had been collecting things for our future restaurant, which I honestly was unsure if it was ever going to happen. But so it was boxes and boxes of, because everything came from thrift stores or garage sales or estate sales. And so just boxes of plates and pots and pans and silverware and all sorts of nonsense, bowling alley floors that we went and salvaged it out of an old bowling alley, which became our tabletops. It was crazy. Anyway, so we drive back to McMinnville. This is at the beginning of June in 2009. And on our way through Portland, we picked up our friends Herb and Fritz, and they came with us. And then the 4 of us spent a month and a week building Thistle out. And it was awesome. We built Thistle out for $35,000, which never happens. We put most of it on credit cards, and then we opened the doors. Our first reservation was for Food and Wine magazine, so we knew we had to be open at 5:30 on July 7th. We got the gas turned on that morning. It was insane. But anyway, it all worked out. So yeah, so that was Thistle. And then I owned that for 13 years and then sold it to my bartender, Patrick. And it's still alive today, which is great. And during that time, we also opened a lot of other things in McMinnville. We opened Community Plate. We opened a bar called Oak and Ivy, which then turned into the Old Oak, which then turned into the Oak, which is now the pub. We opened a taco shop called Tacos de los Muertos, which was right next to the Deluxe. We opened a vintage store. So yeah, we were busy. We changed a lot in a very short amount of time, which is cool. Yeah, and wild.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. And we did all of that. And then my partner left and went to Portland in 2012. So like all of that happened very quickly in 3 years. All of that changed. And then we jointly owned a restaurant in Portland for a while, and then went to Astoria and owned one there for a while. And then we dissolved our business partnership in 2016.
For Thistle specifically, tell me about the concept. You mentioned you've been collecting stuff.
Oh, yeah.
What was the goal with Thistle?
So Thistle was just kind of like a natural evolution. The food was the whole point of it was to support local farms. And when we first moved down here, and we met with local farmers, they weren't very excited to work with us. They had had some pretty bad experiences, poor experiences, I should say, with working with other restaurants, because most restaurants have like set menus and, they need this and they need, and they need the same par like every week or whatever. And our concept was completely different. We operated more like a CSA, like whatever they had left over, they could bring. We put everything out on the counter and then, kind of figure out the menu based on that, which was kind of just a different way of doing things. So we slowly won farmers over and, established some really great relationships over time. And then the technique behind it was pretty classic French. So, yeah, and again, that chalkboard menu, instead of having one that we drag around from table to table, we just had it on the wall when you would walk in. Appetizer, entree, and I believe like when we opened, it was maybe like 4 appetizers and maybe 3 entrees, and then that evolved too. Yeah, and the food evolved, and the kitchen like slowly evolved. Like we just had, like I think like a couple low boys when we first started, and then we got a big, refrigerator, and then we moved that refrigerator into a closet and called that the walk-in, because we didn't have a walk-in, but you walked into this other room to open the refrigerator. We had this super old beat up Wolf stove that we bought used. It was probably 30 years old when we bought it. And we had to take off the door frame in order to get it in, because it was just this massive beast of a thing. But man, it worked. So we had 6 burners and an oven, 22 seats, chalkboard menu, no walk-in. The building itself was on knob and tube. So like if you tried to plug something else in, like a heater, for example, like it would, like everything would fritz out and you would just be like, running to Lowe's, getting more. Like it was, yeah, it was so wild. The space itself was as much of a character as anyone who inhabited it. Which is pretty great.
And you mentioned earlier that the wine list was something you were particularly proud of there. So tell me about that. If you have that kind of food concept, how do you build a wine list around it?
Oh, that was pretty easy. Like by then I had a lot of confidence in my palate and in my purchasing ability. I had great relationships with wine reps that carried over down into wine country kind of miraculously. And, yeah, so just kind of started with some, known favorites of mine, and then it just kind of evolved naturally, and, pick things up from people, and like for like example, for like the local wines, like I would do this thing where I would ask guests would be like, we want a Pinot. So I'd be like, what do you like in your Pinot? And they would be like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay. So I made sure on the wine list that there were, like, let's say if there were 15 different Oregon Pinot Noirs, that they were all like very distinctively different from one another. Yeah. And so building something like that was really fun. I really enjoyed it. That was great. Mm-hmm. And then also like really supporting, again, like the wineries that were doing other things besides Pinot Noir, like really like celebrating the Gamay and the Pinot Meunier and all of that. Like, oh, what? Yeah, it's Nebbiolo, cool. Yeah, stuff like that.
So you mentioned that was a time of a lot of businesses getting started for you. Tell me about how that happened and how you kept a handle on all of those things.
So it was crazy. There was a lot of frenetic energy happening, but I think like once you build out a restaurant, you concept a restaurant and you build it out and it's successful, then it's such a creative thing to do that you get bit by that bug. And again, like I had a partner who this is what we loved to do. We discovered like, this was great. This was amazing. And so we partnered with Scott Cunningham to open Community Plate. It was called Community Plate because that was the name of the silverware that I grew up eating off of. I know. So it was a homage to my mom, which I thought was very sweet. Yeah, and so we just knew that we wanted our same, like the idea of farmer forward, right? Like sourcing was really important to us, and but like putting that application in something that was a little more casual and breakfast lunch focused. So we did that, and again, like we built it all out, and we all of that stuff. It was a tanning salon before it was Community Plate. Everything was like the color of nude pantyhose. It was incredible. But we had a lot of work to do. I mean, we had to do a lot of plumbing. And anyway, everybody learned a lot. I learned a lot. Maybe I wouldn't do something like that again. But yeah, it was great. And it was such an institution for McMinnville for so long. And so many young people actually like moved to McMinnville because of Community Plate, because it was that kind of just chill, kind of hip, and moving back here and having like a concept like Thistle or having a concept like Community Plate was like slowly pulling McMinnville into the here and now, No shade. No. I mean, we can get to that. No, I mean, I was trying to do it in better. We didn't realize that by doing that we kind of opened up Pandora's box a little bit, because you create this, suddenly McMinnville was hip, where it hadn't really been hip before. And then people want that. And then they come in and try to be a part of it. Which of course they can, of course you can, but then that also really changes the fabric. But as we changed the fabric, it's inevitable, I guess.
You talked about outside McMinnville, Project Astoria, projects in Portland. Tell me about, was this just a notion of, I have a concept, I need a place to put it, or? Yeah,
that was more my business partner outgrowing McMinnville. And yeah, so then we went to Portland first and built out and concepted that space, and then sold that, and then went to Astoria, and then we stopped being business partners eventually, which was great. And then by that time, so that would have been 2016, and then by that time. Because it's different, like owning and operating and running a restaurant with a partner, and then having to do it all yourself. It changes everything completely. And so he was gone in 2012. So there was 4 years maybe three, that were just really hard, trying to find the right crew, trying to like really get that getting solid, because, we needed it to be very consistent. Consistency is king in restaurants, even though things are changing every day. So it took me a few years to really find like a super solid team. But then once I did, it was incredible. Mm-hmm.
How is it different, I guess, or what does it feel like owning a restaurant like that, being the decision maker after having worked for so many other people? What are the biggest differences in how you approach it?
Oh, I learned so much. I learned more from working in restaurants that failed than ones that were successful, because you just see these mistakes that people are making. They don't know, no one knows, right? But you internalize that, and you're like, note to self, like, I'm not gonna do it, nope. But you also learn a lot too, like I had never run a business before, and like I didn't know, payroll taxes, for example. Like you're like, what is this? This is ludicrous, But so, I also had a great bookkeeper, Jody McCune. She was an angel. So she really helped me a lot. But yeah, I've always worked really hard. And so that part wasn't new to me. I also think that people think that like if you own a restaurant, it's really easy, or people are like, oh, I love eating out. Like I would love to own a restaurant someday. You're insane. And you don't know what you're talking about, and that's great. But it's a lot of hard work. But it's all the stuff, it's all of that, like the kind of the back end stuff that I didn't know, like those surprise, like insurance is insanely expensive, and, quarterly reports and all of that stuff that I didn't know, but I do now. So, yeah.
What was the initial reception, and how did you build your kind of base of customers at Thistle? We had a lot of press right off the bat, which was great. We opened at the same time as two other kind of interesting other projects were happening in the Valley. So there was a lot of hubbub. There was a lot of media things. Media had a lot to talk about. Like it wasn't just us, which was great. That worked out in our favor. And I think it was a slow build it was a slow build. Social media wasn't a thing. It became a thing, but I just didn't participate in it. We only advertised one time. It was just total word of mouth, which is great. Yeah. As you look back at that time, what were the biggest accomplishments when you owned Thistle? What were the things that made you proudest?
My proudest moment opening or having Thistle was when I was able to provide full benefits for my employees. I was really proud of that. It was a very small restaurant. We served dinner 15 hours. We sat for dinner 15 hours a week. And that made me so happy. I mean, that you're not there 15 hours a week. It takes 90 hours, right, to be open 15 hours. But yeah, that made me, I felt like I had arrived at that time. Mm-hmm.
What prompted you to sell?
There was a lot. Well, my mom had gotten sick in 2018, and my dad was also, his health was failing too. And so starting in in 2018, my priorities just were kind of like naturally shifting a little bit. But I was still like in it to win it. And then, and so that's when I first started thinking about it, right? Because I was like, how am I going to be able to handle this? How am I going to be able to do this and be a caretaker? And then the pandemic happened, and then there was just so much pivoting. You're open, you're closed, you're open, you're closed. There's fires, it was just kind of a crazy time. And I always loved the social aspect of restaurants. I loved meeting new people and talking to new people all of the time. I love talking about food. I love talking about wine. And then during the pandemic, I have a cabin outside of Vernonia, which is where I holed up during the pandemic. And I didn't really talk to anybody. I didn't talk to anybody really for a long time. And I was like, oh, this is actually kind of nice. So it changed me a little bit. And, you know, and then coming back and reopening and, just pivoting. And then I worked in the kitchen and I was done, and I knew I was done, and I needed to be done. But then it really worked out that Patrick wanted to buy it. So, and I think he's doing well, which is great.
Despite obviously feeling like it's the right time to do it, I assume still a difficult thing to let go of a thing like that. What did it feel like when you had sold Thistle?
I mourned for it, which I was not expecting to do, right? Because I was assuming that it would just be nothing but like a sense of relief, right? That's a lot. That's a heavy lift for 13 years. It's a lot to be responsible for these people's livelihoods. So I did feel relief, and I think I felt, some sense of loss. I felt like I didn't have my identity wrapped up in it. I kind of started separating that when I could see that life was going to be changing dramatically in 2018. So that was good for me mentally. But, it's weird. I don't like to go in there at all, which is just so strange to spend that much time in one place and then just be like, oh, no. And then my great-great-grandparents are still hanging up in the bar. Their portraits are still in the bar. I was happy to retire, which is what I thought I was doing, until Kari, Shaughnessy, asked if she was like, I want to do this project called Hayward, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. And I was like, hot diggity, sign me up. I'm all yours.
You're saying I don't have to own it or be in charge?
Bingo. But you get the benefit of me working like I'm an owner because I don't know how to not do that now, but I don't actually have to take it home with me at night. It's amazing. It's great. It works out well for both of us.
Tell me about the concept and about what Kari approached you with.
So we had become friends during the pandemic. We would go on long walks together, and she knew she liked what she was doing at Mac Market, but she wanted to do something more. She wanted to do something more that was like a real restaurant type situation. And yes, we just kind of, talked about it, and then she decided to pull the plug to do it and build that space out in Mac Market that became Hayward, and there it all kind of came about. Like, she was really struggling with, prior to Hayward, they couldn't find like great servers, and service was really an issue for her. And I knew inherently like what she wanted and needed. I could see what she wanted and needed. And I was like, I'm going to get you there. So I did.
So what was the role?
I mean, I'm not taking credit for Hayward being as amazing as it is. I just, from a service perspective, knew what she needed. That's what I meant.
What was the role then? Yeah, what was your initial role? What did she ask of you? What did you contribute?
She just needed someone who could kind of define service at Hayward and kind of design that program, and yeah, that was pretty much it. So when I came in, like, I wasn't the wine buyer or anything like that. I was just in there to create systems and design a level of service that was necessary.
So tell me about that. Tell me about, you have an idea in mind of what the service level is going to be. How do you implement something like that?
Well, you hire and and then you get after it. You hire and you train, and then you just, keep training. Just keep at it. And when we first opened Hayward, it was such an interesting time. No one was really looking for jobs in the service industry. And so my 2 full-time servers that I hired, super sweet people, neither one of them had ever opened a bottle of wine tableside before. And so that's just where I was. That's where we were. And so we built from there.
So looking at a situation like that, what are the key things to train? What are the first things you have to make sure someone can do?
You have to make sure that they have a confidence, right? Like in all things, they have to be confident in, for me, knowledge is the root of confidence. So you have to know, everything that's on the menu. You have to know the wine list. You have to know the cocktail, you have to know so you're not caught off guard or, so that's kind of the basis of all training, and then, kind of go from there. My service style is a little different. I think working at Thistle for so long, it kind of changed my style of service. Because when you're at Thistle, it was essentially just a one-woman show. I didn't have a busser or a host or anything like that. It was just me, Patrick, bartender, chef, sous chef, dishwasher. We were like a band. But then that taught me such efficiency, right? So then efficiency is also an expectation that I have then of service, right? There's no dawdling. There's no over communicating with tables. There's nothing like that. You can, if they need you to, if you can read that and they want you there, then by all means be there for sure. But man, it's their dinner. It's not your dinner. Don't stop inserting yourself into what's happening here on the floor. Anyway, be a torpedo with a smile. Yes, a very knowledgeable torpedo with a smile.
Going to be thinking about that next time I eat out somewhere. I'm going to be thinking about the torpedoes with smiles, I got to tell you.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. So you mentioned that was the initial role for you at Hayward. How has your role grown since then?
It's kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit. The woman who was originally, she bought the wine and kind of designed the bar program at Hayward. She moved on to the Allison. And so then they asked me if I wanted to take over the wine program, to which I initially said no, absolutely not, because it does take a lot of time. And I just wasn't really, I wasn't really ready to do that. But I did it anyway for the kind of the greater good. And and then that was great too. Then that was super fun, and we had a lot of fun with it. My favorite parts of buying wine for Hayward, we did a TV dinner series. The first winter we were open, and so every 2 weeks we were a different TV show, food based on a different TV show. So we became a whole new restaurant every 2 weeks. So that was rad, because I gave myself these crash courses in finding because we needed wine that was very Hayward, so obscure, and, but worked with the food, which is incredibly challenging as it is. So then suddenly we did The Sopranos, and so then the wine list was full of varieties that I had never even heard of out of Italy, and so doing stuff like that was fun. We did Tokyo Vice, and so then I gave myself a crash course on sake. I didn't know anything about sake, and so then we created this badass sake list, and And then we did Twin Peaks, which was also very fun. It was kind of like a return to the Pacific Northwest. And so then that was like finding really weird wine out of Washington, which is harder than you think. But yeah, so doing stuff like that was really fun. It's a good creative outlet.
Just piling the challenges on top of each other.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why not?
I love that.
Yeah.
So obscure, you described the wine list at Hayward as obscure. So tell me about how that came to be and how you interpret that.
Well, I think Kari's, it has to kind of both kind of like mirror and I don't know how to say it exactly. Kari's food is completely one of a kind, right? It's all over the place. It's hyper local, but with these big global flavors, right? So you have to find wine. It needs to be unconventional. The wine list needs to be as unconventional as the food is, to me. That's what I think. And so then trying to find wines that can kind of mirror that, match that, and complement it, and challenge you a little bit. Maybe not as much as the food can challenge you sometimes, but, you know, like it's an experience. Hayward is like a whole experience, right, start to finish. So the wine list has to be a part of that. It can't be something that's pedestrian. I don't, for me. You wouldn't want it to be. You would be so mad. But then I struggle. It's really interesting. Moving to Carleton from McMinnville, we have gotten so much grief about not having enough local wines on the wine list. So much, way more than we got in McMinnville. And McMinnville wasn't a thing at all. And so it's been interesting, like unpacking that and trying to acquiesce in a way where we're not losing our own vision. But Claire from Big Table Farms pointed out, kind of made some things make sense to me about it. She was like, Emily, people who work in the industry live in McMinnville. People who own wineries and vineyards live in Carleton. And I was like, hot dang, I never would have thought of it like that, but you're absolutely right. So it's made us kind of shift. I mean, not in huge ways, but like we're thinking of that and we're working on it. And it doesn't just like happen in a day. And again, we're still looking for things that are, you know, kind of outside of the box. But there's more and more of that happening now, which is really exciting. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the move, obviously, fairly recent move, fairly recent reopening. Tell me about the logistics of moving a restaurant like that and of how the opportunity even came about. Well,
we knew Mac Market presented a lot of challenges, I should say. It's a warehouse. It was cold in the winter. It was crazy hot in the summer. As we became more and more well-known, more and more people, and more of a destination, here we are during like this season, and people are just like too hot. They can't even sit in their seats. So we knew we had to make some changes. And moving a restaurant is typically hard. Like most of the time it doesn't work. Most of the time it's completely unsuccessful. But we thought, you know, we're so young, we're still in our infancy, you know, that maybe it'll work for us. So we had been looking, we had looked at a few different places, and then we got the call that Earth and Sea had closed and that, you know, they were going to rent the spot out. And so we hustled over there and we were like, okay, okay. And then Kari, I think, just asked offhandedly if they would be willing to sell the building. And they were willing and did, which was awesome, which was like super great motivation. And it was it was turnkey, but it needed like a lot of work. It didn't have a lot of personality. Hayward has a lot of personality. And so then we bought the building. We found a great contractor. You know, things kind of started happening, and then we closed at Mac Market. And we moved the entire restaurant in one day. Oh my God. I know. Everything. Cleaned. Everything. Gone. Wild. Like it never happened. It was nuts. Yeah, and then it took a while to I mean, we managed to open on time, which is always a miracle. But yeah, and then we opened into this new beautiful space that has its own challenges too, like being so used to doing this thing in this one space, as challenging as that space was, like those were known challenges. Trying to figure out and, establish systems and recreate systems and do all of this in a new space is still, I mean, we're still figuring it out. Yeah. But it's been great. It's been such a success.
You mentioned a couple of times, I'm talking about building wine lists at Thistle and working on Hayward, challenging. Mm-hmm. I like that word. Tell me about what challenging means to you in a wine list. What is when you're trying to challenge a consumer, mm-hmm. What does that mean to you?
I think it's just, how would I say it? Just thinking outside of the box, like not having obvious wines, right? Like having different varieties that people have never heard of. And then, it gives you an opportunity to educate people and like the why behind it. And some things can kind of challenge what they would normally, what you would normally drink. Like if you normally would have this, I don't know, insert Chardonnay here, like why you should try this Altesse, like, instead, it's good. It's good. And once you build that trust with your clientele, then that's the fun part. Then they're like, what have you got? And you're like, ooh, I just got this weird thing and let's try it. Yeah, it's super fun to me.
So let's look at the future a little bit for yourself. Obviously, you just undergone the restaurant move. Tell me about looking ahead for you. What's next, or what's on your horizon? Anything you're excited about? Anything you haven't done yet that you want to do?
Well, that's I feel like I've been asking myself that a lot recently, and it could just be like a natural time in your life to be asking yourself, like, what am I doing? I think about, I have other concepts in my head that I think would be fun to try. I don't know if I have like the time or the energy to necessarily open anything new, but I still like thinking about it. It's pretty great. So I think about doing stuff like that. There's 3 that I have that kind of kick around from time to time. So, maybe doing something like that, or 2, this is my home. I never thought I would move here. I never thought I would live here as an adult. And both my parents died last year. And so then I've been asking myself, like, what am I doing here anyway? So yeah. So who knows? Who knows what the future holds? But it's exciting to think about. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't seem like someone. You don't seem like someone who retirement's going to take a few tries. It feels like.
Feel like probably. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. You already tried it once, and.
I tried it once. I did. It was nice. Kind of boring. So yeah. So we'll see.
Let's talk about the Oregon wine industry a little bit. Obviously, you have a unique perspective. You grew up here. You've seen a lot of its growth. Tell me about, for you, biggest changes, biggest evolutions in Oregon wine. What are the things that have struck you as you've seen the industry grow and evolve?
Well, I think as it's grown and evolved, like my perspective on it has grown and evolved quite a bit. It waxes and wanes a little bit. I'm glad that there's, I really like to support young, creative, doing different winemakers and projects. And there's so much more of that happening now than ever before. And so I think that that's incredible. I think it's lovely. And if people can make a living doing something like that they're passionate about, fuck yeah, that's awesome. But like the flip side of that, monocultures, it's kind of a slippery slope, And what we're seeing happening right now with the decrease in people worldwide drinking alcohol, not just wine in general, but, it's kind of a scary time for the wine industry. And I hope that it can recover, and I hope that, not too many people lose their shirts in the process.
Well, on that note, look ahead a little bit for the industry for me. What is the future? What do you hope for the future? What do you kind of foresee happening for the Oregon wine industry over the next 4 or 5 years?
Honestly, I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned. For a lot of reasons. And it crosses over like into the restaurant industry too, because, tourism is down, and tourism in the Willamette Valley is like down. And that's scary. And I think we're all going to have to pivot in that a little bit. And I don't know if that's because people, like anyone who has wanted to come to the Willamette Valley already has, or I'm not quite sure. I mean, no, it's an onion of a problem. But anyway, it's just, I'm very concerned. And I think that if people have the ability to ride it out, then, hold on to your hats. You should. But we kind of oversaturated. It's just what happens like when people start doing like a cool thing, and then everybody wants to do the cool thing, and then suddenly everybody's doing the cool thing and it's not cool anymore. And what do you do then? So much money has been invested, so much on so many different levels, in the Oregon wine industry. And the tourism that's brought in. So, I see a lot of pivoting in our future. Sorry, that was bleak, but honest.
I appreciate the honesty.
Sure.
You obviously, similar question about McMinnville. You've obviously seen McMinnville grow and change and played a role in that growth and change. Tell me about McMinnville now versus, what are the biggest changes? What are the biggest changes in the city, in the town? And where does it go from here?
There's so much change. You have to realize that, I remember when McDonald's first went in, right? I've seen a lot of change. A lot of change. So, I really like where McMinnville is right now. I love 3rd Street. I love our little downtown core. I love the Granary district, I love the boho district. I love that we're, kind of branching out. I love that we still, at least in the core of McMinnville, still support small independent business owners. I think that's amazing, wonderful, and very rare. And as for kind of the sprawl that's kind of happening as we get towards the edges of town, that's natural and that's just going to happen. That just is what it is. It's a very easy place to live, McMinnville. Too easy sometimes.
All right. That is all the questions that I have for you.
Great.
Anything I didn't ask that I should have?
I don't
Anything
think
we didn't talk about you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is that okay?
That was fantastic. Are you kidding? That was amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us.
You're welcome.
Coming to visit us today.
Not very interesting, but thank you.
That is wrong. It was very, very interesting. Thank you so much. We'll let you off the hook.
Okay, thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.